What's up, folks? Welcome to 4th and 16 Sports. I'm your host, Ellis Tolbert, coming to you live from Pronk Studios here in Greenville, South Carolina. I hope you guys are all having a great night tonight. We are going to be multicasting to you tonight from Twitter, YouTube, and Facebook. We got that going. It's going to be really, really fun. If you're watching on Twitter, I need you to retweet this, maybe like it if you enjoy it. If you're watching on YouTube right now, go ahead. Don't even worry about any of that good stuff. Like, subscribe, do all that stuff. I don't know how YouTube works. We're going to have fun with it. And if you're watching on Facebook, obviously retweet it. Retweet. Wow, here we go. That's going to show you how the night's going to go. and just go ahead and share it with all your friends and family. We're going to have some fun tonight. Tonight is going to be an interesting show. We got a lot to talk about. I got my main man, Drew Yenser, in the back on the controls, and my man, Fax and Childress, over on the couch to talk football with me.
What's up, guys? Looking forward to talking about what's going on today, just with the cancellation and stuff. It's been an eventful 24 hours for the sport of college football.
It has been a painful 24 hours for college football, 48 more or less. So we're going to try and figure out how to get through all that. Obviously, if you're watching, you already know, unless you're just sleeping under a rock, that the Big Ten and the Pac-12 have officially canceled football for the 2020 season. If you're looking at the Pac-12, they said, we're not going to play now, we're not going to play in the spring, we're just going to let this go. If you're looking at the Big Ten, they're saying we're going to try and reboot this in the spring. And folks, I'm going to tell you right now, it's the dumbest crap I've ever heard in my life. It's not going to work. You're not going to be able to play in the spring. Folks, if you'll do me a favor, let us know in the comment section if we have any kind of technical issues, audio, video, anything like that. We're trying to have the best show that we can, so go ahead and let us know in the comment section if you could do that. But to get started, we're going to go ahead and talk about this whole situation. Now, folks, first and foremost, this is the weirdest thing in my life. I've never seen something like this, obviously. We're going to talk about having two of the bigger conferences, of course, Power 5 conferences, drop from having football in the fall. And there's just a whole lot of stuff that goes with that. I want to get your opinions. Please get in the comment section with us tonight. Tell us what you think about this. This is crazy. I know none of you have ever seen it too, so let's go ahead and get into it. First and foremost, I think let's say the most obvious thing, the biggest loser in this whole situation is definitely Ohio State. You got one of the best teams that you've had in a long time. Last year was supposedly your best team you've had ever, and this year could have been possibly better than that. You had a lot of guys transfer in. You got a lot of recruiting. You got a brand new head coach, second-year head coach, that everybody thinks is the second coming of Jesus. I mean, at this point, you were looked at as the either number one team or two team. Of course, the coaches poll came out and had them at number two. Everybody out there thinks they were either number one or number two.
And listen, I would even go as far as saying that I think Ohio State might have had a better roster than Clemson with the departure of Justin Ross going into the season. And when you look at how the roster is constructed, a lot of people will be like, oh, well, they lost Chase Young. They've got two 5-star recruits back in there to replace him. This roster is absolutely loaded, and it really sucks if you're a Buckeye fan because this is your best chance at a national championship in recent memory, like you said. So you got to feel for them to an extent. I know their fan base is kind of toxic, as are most college football fan bases. That's kind of how the sport operates. But you got to feel for Justin Fields because seems like a really good kid. Transferred from Georgia, had such a great and record-breaking season last year, and now, I mean, we've seen him be vocal on Twitter about how much he wants to play. And now, I don't think a transfer is out of the question for Justin Fields. And I mean, you're talking about a shoe-in top 5 pick in the NFL draft that we're just getting robbed of. So, as a fan of the sport, it sucks to see.
To me, this is probably the biggest ball droppage I've seen in football in a long time. We've seen a lot of dumb stuff happen in college football, but this is crazy. Obviously, Commissioner Kevin Warren of the Big Ten basically was the first to pull the plug of the Power 5 schools. Obviously, we know that the MAC decided to go ahead and do it. You know that the Midwestern Conference decided to do it. But in the long run, I'm not really trying to put those teams down. Nobody gives a damn about those schools. We want to really talk about the schools that had a chance to go out there and make a lot of money playing some competitive football and possibly get into the playoffs. That was going to be the whole storyline. Think about this. Can LSU come back? Is Alabama ever going to really get back? Have they been dethroned? Is Clemson going to win the national championship this year after last year's crushing defeat? Is Ohio State going to give them revenge from the last game that they played? We had all those storylines. Not going to get them this year. So it's really, really painful to sit here and watch that. Like I said, and you made a great point, Justin Fields could potentially transfer. I'm thinking of it this way. If they're talking about trying to do any of this spring crap, there is zero chance that you get Justin Fields back. We've already seen Micah Parsons from Penn State go. We've already seen some of the better people. Rondale Moore's gone. We've already seen these players do that.
These people that are legitimate Heisman candidates are opting out now with a potential fall football season. So if you're a player of Justin Fields' caliber, you gain absolutely nothing by playing in this hypothetical spring season, which I don't even think is possible.
Yeah, it's just there's so many technical issues with trying to start a spring game, spring season, and we'll get into that a little bit later tonight. Folks, if you will, though, go ahead and put in the comment section where you're from, where you're watching from. The page has obviously grown over the years. We want to know who's watching with us, having fun. Just go ahead and get yourself in the comment section. I got Jonathan Cheek in the comment section. He says, I don't get the postponement. Players can get the virus from everyday life just as easily as they could by playing the games against the teams with safety protocols just as strict. And he says, and as far as playing in spring, that many games, one calendar year, that's just asking for unnecessary injuries. Spot on.
I would agree with that.
Spot on, Jonathan. Good take, man. Think about this. If you're starting a game in the spring, first and foremost, is for all that we know, if you're an SEC, an ACC team, or a Big 12 team fan, you're probably going to play this year. You could get canceled or postponed or something, but right now it seems like those conferences are all go. They're going to play and get over with like normal, get all their postseason stuff, get through their spring. But you're going to be talking about two conferences trying to not only just play, but then immediately go into recovery mode so that they can play in the fall. That's 2 seasons in 1 year. Kids complain about playing that many games in 1 year. Imagine if they're playing 24 in 1 year. That's not happening. So good point. I really like that take. And
I think he hit the nail on the head in every aspect of that because, I mean, when you think about it, when he said the part about players can get the virus just as easily as everyday life so they could from playing games, and I would even go out and say that it's more likely that in a college environment, you're interacting with more people than you're going to be interacting on a football field.
Yeah, absolutely.
And especially when you know that there is going to be the maximum amount of precautions taken for all these football teams to stay on the field. There is a good amount of funding involved to get daily tests to make sure all the players can stay safe. I think that there's risk regardless due to the pandemic, and I think that not playing football, but on the same tangent saying, okay, but we're going to send these kids to college and they're going to go to class, I just think it's kind of hypocritical of the NCAA.
It's extremely hypocritical, but I will tell you this. I think the NCAA is doing everything that they can to try to go, we ain't got anything to do with this.
They're trying to, instead of taking a stand, there's no leadership involved.
No.
Instead of trying to take a stand and do what's best for these people as athletes, as men, as players, they are taking a neutral stance, backing out, and trying to pretty much just have as little involvement as possible and anger as little people as they can. And it's completely backfiring on them because you're getting backlash from all these conferences that are getting canceled, and now everything's messed up because you've got conferences playing, you got conferences not playing, and it's just creating a whole unnecessary controversy. And the only finger to point at is the NCAA for handling it extremely poorly.
Yeah, and that's what we will all do. We will all unintentionally start blaming the NCAA. Now, I think the NCAA is inept. They're dumb. They can't find their head from the butt. But at the same time, in this situation, I do believe that this was mostly brought on by the two commissioners of the Big Ten and the Pac-12. And let's be honest about it. You brought up a good point about how it's hypocritical about these students arguably being safer than the average person because they are a part of an organization that's going to do everything to keep them safe, but they can still go to school. I think it's 100% about liability. I don't think it has a whole lot to do with the immediate fact about it. Of course, we've seen medical issues come out about myocarditis. That's something that players do deal with in college football. It's a terrible thing, and we've also seen some correlation between that and COVID. Now, look, we're going to go ahead and put out the disclaimer. neither Fax or I are epidemiologists. We're not immunologists. Neither one of us have a doctorate's degree in medicine. But I think we can, again, we can come to a good conclusion that they are going to be taken care of. If a player has myocarditis, they know about it. They've already ran those tests. That's something that's swept aside, right? We already know what this player is dealing with. If they're at risk with asthma or any other things, we're going to take care of them. Again, you have these players a part of an organization with strict protocols. My man Drew Yinser in the back, big Ohio State fan, was just talking about this. Ohio State actually has some of the best protocols in college football. They are one of the gold standards. Everybody wants to look up to them. Yet they were still one of the ones in a conference that were pushed out. So I just don't understand the idea of moving. I really think that Ohio State got robbed.
You're hitting the nail on the head once again here. It's just, you don't have to be a doctor to understand how many people you're going to interact with on a daily basis. And I think that if these players were isolated to an extent in this organization playing football against these guys, and I mean, these guys have the access to the highest level medical test possible, just being a part of these high caliber programs, especially guys at Clemson, Ohio State, and you have their medical records on file, and they're going to do, these programs and these schools are going to do everything they can to protect their students and their athletes. And these people are at the top of the totem pole for testing and stuff like that. So I just it really sucks that the NCAA is not trying to play. Yeah. And I think at this point, it's just more of a thing where they don't want direct blame, like you said, because this is how they view it. If someone gets COVID, and players on Clemson have already had COVID, if someone gets COVID on campus or elsewhere, that's not their fault. You can't point the finger at the NCAA and say, oh, this is the evil NCAA giving them COVID, because that's them making their own decisions. But if something happens and there's an outbreak in a head-to-head game, and then all of a sudden half the locker room, everyone is going to point their finger directly at the NCAA. And I feel like that is the exact reason why the NCAA isn't pushing more for a season or some sort of protocol season or a shortened season, condensed season, any of these things.
And you know, one of the big deals, I've seen this tossed around a lot on a lot of forums, on Twitter and different places, and people asking questions, why can't the players sign a waiver? First of all, you can't do that. That's one of the worst things you can ever even try to do. You're not going to make an 18 to 21-year-old sign a waiver to play when it's potentially life or death. So that's out of the door. So I think one of the biggest deals that they just, again, it boils down to liability. Now, if you're a Clemson fan, man, you are happy, you are proud of your Clemson boys. I mean, specifically Darian Rencher and Trevor Lawrence. These two took to the internet, decided to air their voices out, and talk about the things that they want. They were able to get together with the guys from the Pac-12, the We Are United movement, and the Big Ten movement, pretty much in a quick flash succession, just go ahead and FaceTiming everybody, talking about what we want, try to get everything together, because as some of you may know, it seems like there were sides, right? It was like one side of players in college football were saying, we want to play. We just want to play. There was a hashtag trending, still trending. But then there was the other side that was saying, we don't want to play. We're not going to play until you meet these long list of demands. I mean, say what you want. Whatever side of the fence you are on that one, that was a really crazy list. I mean, some of those things were like 50% compensation from total revenue from college football in their conference. That's
a complete different topic that we can make an entire episode on the compensation of college athletes, but that's not what this is about.
No, and because of the players coming together, putting their voices together and explaining what they would like. Of course, that was still on there. A potential players union, maybe a group of players, is still on the table for 2021 and beyond. Of course, like I try to tell everybody, that you can suppress that for 1 year. Everybody's talking about, they're only letting them play because they want them to be able to have to go ahead and kill that and show the power of the NCAA and the powers that be that we're not going to pay you. It has nothing to do with that. These kids can do that next week. They can do it next year. They can do it 10 years from now. They're still going to be asking for that type of thing. So that's moot point, right? Mm-hmm. The big deal, though, is that they were able to come together largely because of some players from Clemson, Stanford. We had some players from Oregon. Penei Sewell was one of them. Heck, they even got one of the players that is a graphic design major to make a big billboard and post it just immediately, basically saying that we are united as a college football program across the country. We all want to play. Let us do this, right?
Yeah.
The main thing was, hey, we just want health and safety protocols. Everybody just be universal with that. Give us the best chance to play and stay healthy at the same time.
Yes, and we've got Kim Hannigan in the comments saying, hate it for the handful of boys that stayed this year just because they thought they were good, they could contribute to what we felt was going to be a killer year. And that's a great point.
That's a great point.
All these people that have stayed for their senior season or have worked their way up the depth chart and their coaches have given them commitments, hey, you stay that one more year, you're going to get this starting role, or someone coming back to try and boost their draft stock, their dreams are dead. Yeah. Their dreams are dead because of the NCAA and this pandemic. And these kids' dream is to play in the NFL, and now they're being hindered of that right because their conference is choosing to opt out. And you see a lot of these vocal leaders on Twitter. I know that Trevor Lawrence isn't a senior, but this is presumptively his last year in college.
Yeah.
So these guys that they know it's going to be their last year, they want this experience. They want to go out there and they want to compete because that's what they do. They're athletes. That's their job. So you really got to feel for all the seniors this year and all of the, especially the guys that came back to try and boost their NFL draft stock, because this could impact them for the rest of their lives because they can't boost their draft stock and they might not be able to get on an NFL roster now.
Yeah. Folks, if you do us a favor, go ahead and get in the comment section. Let us know your opinions on this. And also, if you could just do us a favor, a huge favor, share this, create a watch party with your people. Let's have fun tonight. We got a lot of bummer news to talk about, so let's try to have some fun with it. Good point. There's something that I want to talk about with that too. You know, and think about it. You know, we talked about Trevor, presumptively the last season. He hasn't really said that, but everyone kind of knows. You're the number one draft.
He's going to be the number one draft.
Right?
He's deemed as the greatest college QB prospect ever.
Right.
Him and Peyton Manning.
Right.
So he's going to go to the NFL.
Now think about this. Everybody knows about the Trevor Lawrences, but what about the guys like the Darian Renters who's out there fighting because he's a fifth-year senior, folks. He doesn't have any more eligibility. You take this away from him, and, well, it's just going on to regular life. And there's a lot of guys across the country like that, not just at Clemson. And Clemson's one of the elite teams in the country, one of the top 3 elite teams in the country dealing with this. We're talking about Ohio State a lot. We talked about Justin Fields. We already know Justin Fields is going to be a top 3, 4 pick as well in the NFL, barring he goes out. But think about this. Trey Sermon, a guy from Oklahoma, 1,000-yard rusher, had an injury last year, was unable to play, decided to transfer his last year. He's already graduated. Transfer his last year and play for the Ohio State Buckeyes, right? Not happening. You just literally transfer from a school that's going to play. That's going to play to a school that's not going to play, especially when the NFL's looming and you want that tape. So what does he do? He's between a rock and hard place. Do you transfer back? Do you transfer someone else? We hadn't even thought about this. Do these kids have time to transfer? We're about to start the season in 3 or 4 weeks.
This hypothetical season is expected to start like within a month.
Yeah.
So these kids that are at these programs, like you see these Justin Fields, like, and maybe even not guys of that caliber, but there are players at these programs that could 100% find their way onto an ACC, SEC, Big 12 roster.
Oh, yeah.
100%. And these kids are at the cream of the crop at their profession, which is playing football. So these people don't even have time to apply for a transfer, get it granted, and play. That process takes 6 months plus, maybe sometimes even a year.
Unless you're Tate Martell.
It is really unfair. This whole timeline by the NCAA, it's really unfair to these kids in the Pac-12 and the Big Ten that aren't able to play this year because now they don't have an alternative option.
Yeah, that's right.
If this conclusion would have came a couple months ago, because you could have predicted that this was going to escalate to this point. If this conclusion was made a couple of months ago, these kids would have had time to transfer to these other schools or figure out an alternative solution, figure out ways to boost their draft stock, figure out how to get on the football field. Now, you're leaving them a 3 to 4 week period on, can I even transfer? What are my options? Do I sit out? Do I try and go play somewhere else? And it's completely unfair to all these kids that are trying to play.
Yeah, and so we're only really talking about the Big Ten because obviously we know there's a lot of talent out there. Again, a guy like Tanner Morgan, quarterback for Minnesota, that was trending up and was getting good film. But now it's going to be one of those deals where he's got to figure out where to go. He's got to figure out if he can transfer. I know he doesn't want to play in spring. Is he going to sit out? Is he going to be ready for it? Issues. But think about the Pac-12. There's going to be a lot of revivals in the Pac-12. We're talking about USC potentially getting back on track. How's Oregon going to do in the next year under Mario Cristobal? He's got a new quarterback now. He's got all these things going on. Great defense. Are they going to be the stalwarts out there? How far does Washington drop back? Cal, we talk about Cal a lot.
And
Cal's going to be a team.
These breakout teams in these conferences, like specifically just speaking, Cal, like these teams like USC even, Penn State, that these teams were on the verge, and this was looking like a year where they could make that jump to a playoff caliber team, and now they're just not even playing football. It's just, seriously, it's just taken away from them like that.
Yeah. To be honest, I don't know how they're going to financially recover from this. If you're a Tiger King fan, you get that reference. But seriously, I don't know how they recover from this. And, we were already talking about tossing between how some programs are going to be hurting because they don't have the finances that a Clemson, Alabama, or Georgia, Florida, Ohio State has, right? But if you're just one of those lowly little schools that are trying to make it happen, if you're
like a school like an Oregon State,
it's rough. It's going to be rough. So going forward, is it possible that we see some of these schools start to turn into the UConns, the teams that were decent before and starting to trail off, and then having to consider, Idaho Vandals? We had that. People forget about Idaho. They used to be an FBS school. Now they've had to drop down to FCS because they didn't have the money. They just couldn't compete either. Well, are we going to see that with the Power 5 now? Can we even call it a Power 5? This year, it's looking like Power 3.
And it's just really, when you look at it from a financial aspect, you're looking at, I don't know if you saw, but there was a specific number that the Atlanta Braves gave out. And their profit margins had dropped like in the 90s.
That's awful.
And this is a team that's actually playing.
Yeah.
And this is a professional organization that is actually playing their games, and their profit margin is dropping that much. And I remember the Iowa State AD gave out a number that was in like the multiple hundred millions of the profit of that everyone in the conference would probably lose close to $1 billion if that conference stopped playing football. So there's just hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars that are being lost by football not being played this year. And it's going to take such a financial hit on some of these schools and some of these programs. Like Ellis said, you just got to wonder if they can even financially stay afloat and afford these scholarships for these kids to come in. Like you got to think of the impact that if you're at like a lower tier Power 5 school and you're at the bottom of the totem pole, and I saw something about Washington State doing this, these kids might start losing their scholarships.
Yes.
Because they can't financially fund them to go to the school.
That's right.
And I've seen that at least 5 to 6 players on Washington State already have been told that they don't have a spot anymore because they can't afford it.
Yeah. And imagine losing your best player in Max Borghi.
Yeah.
Or something like this.
Like you get to the point where these cuts are so significant that you might not even be able to field 53 players that'll come out and play because you're going to have to either take away their scholarship or you're going to have to reduce the amount of money they're getting.
Well, yeah, and think about this too. Stanford, a school that's not hurting for money, literally had to cut, I think it was 8 or 9 programs. And folks, this doesn't just affect football. If football's being taken out for the fall, and that's the main breadwinner for all schools that are major, right? You're going to be losing a lot of other programs. I mean, there's going to be a lot of women's programs that are gone. All you equestrian fans that go to South Carolina and happy that you win your championships in that, that's gone. Sorry. All these things are going to have to change. But I will say this, there's going to be some kind of resolve from this. They can't just let this happen and there is no kind of fix for it, right?
There has to be
something.
There has to be a fix because there's too much money involved, and there's too many of these young kids and athletes' lives on the line, and their livelihood is at stake. So there has to be a solution here, and I'm not smart enough to come up with a solution. Yeah. I don't have a position of power, but there's some people in the higher ups that you just have to say enough is enough. There has to be a solution at hand here.
Here's what I want to know, folks. There's been a lot of talk about some of the commissioners saying things like, well, the NBA is playing, the MLB's playing, soccer's playing, but they have bubbles, and we can't bubble these kids. I call BS on that. And the reason why I do is because, again, these programs can be contained. What are some of the bigger programs around the country spending so much money on right now? They're spending it on facilities. They want to make sure they all have a football complex so they can look cooler than the other. By the way, Clemson still has the best complex.
Definitely.
But you think about it. These are all inclusive complexes. People like to rag on Clemson because they had a slide. Well, guess what they also have? Movie theater. They also have a bowling alley, basketball, putt-putt. They have nap rooms. They have a weight room, a whole kitchen, a whole cafeteria area. These are places that these kids can go without having to go out and get it intermingling. And something that Darian Rencher said the other night, last night actually, in an interview, he actually talked about how, nowadays, but most kids would, when they go out, they would probably not necessarily pay attention to washing their hands, social distancing, wearing a mask, all that jazz, right? But he said because we have something to play for, something we have to fight for, something we all want, they're more willing to do whatever it takes to stay healthy and keep their teammates healthy, right?
Yeah.
That is a bubble to me. A lot of these teams, Clemson, can charter their own plane. They don't have to go through terminals at GSP. They can do whatever they want to. You can take a bus if you really want to do that to a place.
And that's why I don't like the whole concept of entire conferences canceling, because Ohio State has that type of funding and pull as well. And they're a national title contender.
Believe that.
And now they just can't play.
Yeah, and again, the biggest thing is something that you mentioned earlier, and I want to piggyback off of that a little bit, is that none of us really know the answers to this, folks. I mean, truthfully, we still don't know what the COVID-19 disease is. We have no idea. We're still kind of going, You see all these other countries trying to get it right. They're, for the most part, okay. We're still trying to figure it out a little bit over here. But at the same time, we have guidelines, right? We have things that they have told us. We have things that the CDC, World Health Organization, has told us to do to try to keep ourselves healthy. That's been washing our hands, keeping up with hygiene, wearing a mask, whether you want to do that or not, and social distancing. It is what it is, right? Here is the problem. You have had months to figure this out. You have been able to watch NBA have issues here and there. Baseball waffle about it. You've been able to watch soccer do it. You've had conversations from people all over the country. You've had doctors. You've had lawyers. Everybody in on this. And this is the conclusion you come to? Talking about trying to play a freaking spring season when no one of note is going to play that spring season. This is about football for these kids. Some of these kids don't have the opportunity to go home and sit in a mansion with their kid and with their family and just quarantine, right?
These kids aren't professional athletes. These are students. They're students first, you could argue. So these kids, this is their livelihood at stake, this is their education at stake, and this is their hobby and passion at stake. So it's just really unfair, especially on the NCAA's part, now you're canceling one conference or two conferences at a time, and other conferences are going to play, and it's really a bad look, number one, and it's just an indictment of poor leadership.
It is the worst, and that's the one thing that the college has been kind of like the spotlight, the microscope has been on them for so long because the leadership is non-existent. I don't know what it's going to take. Mark Emmert and NCAA, reshuffling it. Is it going to have to take having one solid voice to say this is what's happening, this is what we're going to do? Because I'm going to get to that point right now. Why is it that the SEC, the ACC, and Big 12 have talked to doctors as well, and those doctors have given them the green light as far as their protocol and say, you guys can play, just be safe. We don't know if you're going to make it through the whole season, but you should be fine, right? The SEC and the ACC and Big 12, they're like, hey, man, let's do it. For all intents and purposes, the American Conference is kind of like, Sun Belt is like, hey, we'll play. But the Big Ten, one of the best conferences as far as having a lot of guys who are on their board, the commissioner, you have guys that are ADs, that are actual doctors, can't figure out what to do. Then you have the Pac-12 who are just kind of like, whatever you say, Big Ten, we'll follow you guys. What?
I think this is the worst case scenario out of every. In all honesty, I would have rather had a full cancellation than what's currently being proposed, because at least we would have gotten an explanation that would have made sense. What's currently transpiring makes no sense at all. It's inexcusable for these major conferences that are worth billions upon billions of dollars that they're not on the same page, and it's poor communication, and it's just an awful situation all around.
Well, here, I'll tell you something that's going to be the biggest indicator of how we go forward in 2021, because for all intents and purposes, everybody talking about we're going to play in spring, we don't know if we're going to be past coronavirus in 2021. We don't have a single clue. Everybody keeps talking about a vaccine. Those things take a whole lot of time to make and to be able to, determine their efficacy. We're going to do that fast track just so we could do it. Are you going to have all your players mandatory take a vaccine so that they can play? You can't do that because you can't have a waiver, remember? So how is this going to work out? So I don't understand the disconnect between the NCAA, medical doctors, and the individual conferences.
And I'm blaming the NCAA for just creating this absolute hell scenario in which no one is on the same page. It seems like every conference and every player has a different opinion on this, and that there's absolutely no common ground that the NCAA is trying to push forward to and say, here's something that could possibly work, let's throw it out here and see who we can get on board with this. Instead, they're just kind of sitting back and letting conferences make their own decision, which sucks for everyone involved because now we have 3 conferences playing and 2 not, and now we don't have schedules, and now what about these, like something that's not even being discussed, what about the FCS schools?
Yeah.
Like, what about the FCS schools? What about the lower tier D1 schools, like the group of 5 schools? Like, these guys are absolutely screwed now because of these decisions that these individual conferences are making because the NCAA will not step in and say, this is what we're doing and you're going to go with it.
Yeah. Actually, that's a good statement. Jonathan Cheeks back in the comments section. He says, aside from the programs, what does this situation do to the college towns that get a majority of their revenue from football season? We're talking bars, stores, restaurants, hotels, Airbnbs, etc. They're going to be screwed. I mean, right now, you got to think about it. For Clemson, everybody likes to think that Clemson is just this big Taj Mahal of cities. You've got football there, and we just have so many robust things in the city of Clemson. Clemson is a relatively small school for all of you who has never been there. It's a small school.
Especially compared to these schools like Ohio State, Michigan,
Yes.
all these schools up north. Clemson is tiny.
This is why people always like to call Clemson a hick town. It really is a small town, right? But then you got to think about that compared to somewhere like Knoxville or Columbus or Ann Arbor or anything like that. They're going to be fine as far as everything because they are big, bustling cities. You're talking about somewhere like Eugene, Oregon, where it's going to be rough for them to try to figure out what to do when the University of Oregon's not going to be playing. Of course, they have Phil Knight. They're going to be taken care of somewhat money-wise, but it's still not the same for when you do not have revenue coming in from arguably college's biggest financiers besides the endowment, right?
And yeah, and I'm glad this point was brought up because when you continue to delve deeper and deeper into this topic, you just continue to see the more and more people and the more and more businesses and the more and more just groups of people in general that are affected by this and directly affected by the cancellation, specifically of these 2 conferences. And we have a great point being brought up by Neil Grimesley out of the comment section. He said, you can't give an extra year eligibility without screwing up the recruiting classes. There's nowhere to put the players that need to be gone for the new recruiting classes. Exactly.
That's right.
So what's happening here is these players from these conferences that aren't playing, they're pretty much being stripped of a year of eligibility because you can't grant these guys an eligibility, and because they can't stay at the school.
Right.
So you're going to have to come up with this solution where you can say you can either transfer and have eligibility, or you can not have eligibility and stay. And there's no solution here, and it's because once again there's no common ground, and we have everyone on a different page.
Well, you know one thing that's going to happen from that, I'm telling you now, we won't probably see as many recruits transfer right now or decommit. We've already seen Ohio State actually lose one. It was a Clemson target at 1 point, 4-star. You won't see as much as that happen now. You won't see, I don't think you're going to see a whole lot of mass exodus of players now that this decision has been made right now. I think they're still working out the kinks. It's going to be hard if you're a player that, say, you were a wide receiver at, I don't know, Indiana, right? You're not going to be able to transfer to Wake Forest and play immediately because you don't know their offense. 2 totally different offenses. You're going to be way behind. You might as well just watch the season, right? So I don't know if they're going to be able to do that. We've talked about the season's going to be starting in less than a month, so I don't really know how that's going to work. I will say this, though. Next season, during the spring, you're going to see a lot of decommitments because, like he said, you're going to have kids who are supposed to come in. Think about this year. Think about how it always is. Clemson has, if you're a Clemson fan, you're anybody out there because this happens all over. You have early enrollees, right? Those guys that decide to go ahead and forego that last little bit of school and go ahead and get into the college. You get a head start on the playbook, get into the program, familiarize yourself with it. Well, these guys are not going to be able to do that at all. You're going to have a full season going on, supposedly. And what are they going to do? What about the guys that were coming in this year who, you know, they don't have a season Are they literally just freshmen again? But they're going to school. Do you give them that eligibility? Does NCAA really want to give them that?
Because, the biggest part of this is the recruiting aspect, because there are going to be a lot of these players that don't have spots if the extra eligibility is granted, but you can't just take eligibility away from these players on the same tangent. So it just creates this dystopia in the middle of it's just a giant gray area of eligibility, and it's nobody's fault but the NCAA. There's no one else to blame.
That's crazy.
And they're doing this whole shebang to avoid blame, and by that they're creating more issues into which they're directly to blame.
Yeah.
Because there's no one else to point the finger at because it's their fault.
First and foremost, folks, I want to lighten the mood a little bit. Drew, if you do me a favor, go on to the front shot real quick. Just lighten the mood. If you can do that for me. You see this? We got plants here. We're trying to liven up the place, try to make it a little bit more homely. So if you enjoy it, let us know. But man, I have a hard time believing that you are going to actually have a spring football season. Urban Meyer actually came out and said it was laughable. Urban Meyer is like the king of the Big Ten for now. Yeah, and really until Ryan Day can match what he did, Urban Meyer's still kind of that guy. He's that dude for the Big Ten, right? Even he thought it was stupid. Big 12 is like, hey, man, we're not doing that. We're going to play now. SEC was like, hey, our doctors have told us we're good, and ACC is like, put anybody in front of us.
And here's the concern with that. What if you get a scenario where these three conferences play out their season? Then what is the NCAA going to step in and say about a national championship? That's what I'm concerned about.
In my opinion, you cannot, not that it really matters because the Big Ten has been left out a lot. Yeah. And when a championship was 2 times in the last 20 years.
And the Pac-12's not going to.
The Pac-12's not getting there. Every year we talk about that. But at the same time, you arguably have the best team in the country or the second best team in the country.
And they're just not playing.
And they're just not going to play.
And then to go further down that road, what if they come back in the spring and say, hey, we're still going to play, and a national championship has already been played, and they figure out a way to play this spring season? Then they're going to try and say, oh, well, we couldn't compete for that national championship, and it's just going to create this whole mix of...
Yeah, the asterisk
And they're going to try and claim it like UCF style, like, listen,
my gosh.
Ohio State runs through the Big Ten spring season, and they're going to say, oh, well, why can't we compete for the national championship?
Well, you know what's going to be funny about this whole deal, and this is something that we're not thinking about? First and foremost, the Pac-12 has already said we are not playing in the spring. That's that, right? So if they are already going conference only, you're going to have the Big Ten playing conference only. How can you be the national champion when you literally only played your conference? You can't be a national champion. That's like, it's just not possible, right? Even if you do branch out and decide to play the MAC or the Ivy League, the 2 other conferences that say, hey, we're going to try it. Actually, I think Midwestern Conference is going to try it too, right? There is 0 chance that you can claim a national championship if Clemson or Alabama or Georgia or LSU or Oklahoma State, if they're all playing in the playoffs and one of those teams win, that you can claim a championship over one of them.
Yeah.
0 chance.
And we have Jason Priester chiming in the comments. He says, remember, the NCAA doesn't even control the college football playoff.
No, that's Hancock.
So what is the college football playoff and the committee? What is their solution to this if only 3 conferences play, but these people are still planning to play a spring season? Because if these 3 conferences play in the fall, is the Big Ten and the Pac-12, are they going to back down from the spring season, or are they going to say we're still going to play in the spring? Because I'm genuinely confused about what's going to transpire if these 3 conferences do come out and play and the Big 12 and the Pac-12 stay canceled.
Folks, get us in the comment section with your opinion on that. That's something that kind of just threw me for a little bit. I'm besides myself hearing that. That's a good point. I didn't really think about that. Shout out to Jason Priester, Clemson Tiger, Sports Illustrated, good guy, one of my good friends. The college football playoffs are thinking this way. Well, at least if we have 3 conference teams, we can still put 2 SEC schools in.
That's just more excuse for them to
They're fine.
We're like, oh, we'll put Florida, Georgia, and Alabama in there with Clemson.
We'll put all of them in there. But they are probably one of the few people that don't care. Yeah. They just don't care. They'll say, we'll do whatever. If it comes down to just having 2 conferences, they'll just do 2 teams. They do not care. we'll go back to BCS. I think right now the problem is with all the other places, all the other schools, all the other conferences trying to figure out how they're going to position themselves. This is a good question. Is UCF not only going to get into the playoffs?
That's what I was about to bring up.
Can they do it?
This is probably, if there's ever a time for a group of 5 school to build up a resume and a case to get into the college football playoff, now would be the time.
But you know what is really crappy about that?
Because even then, you know that they wouldn't have gotten in if those other 2 conferences were
right. And you know where I'm going with this, right?
Yeah.
Next year, zero chance in hell you get back there.
Yeah.
They're going to change everything.
They could get
back.
in and win. They could win the whole thing. You could get Cincinnati in the playoffs this year, and they could win the national title. And there's no way they get back in.
No, never
because
again.
That's just how the system operates.
That would literally be the one-off. I'm glad I could get a good chuckle out of that.
Yeah.
But at the same time, these are serious conversations that we're going to have to talk about because this is what our reality is going to be for the 2020 season. So, yeah, let's go ahead and get into it. Let's talk about the 3 conferences that we're all hoping that plays because that's it for the Power 5. You've got the Big 12, excuse me. They're trying to invade my way still on the show. You've got the Big 12. You've got the SEC and the ACC. I saw a really good, funny video. I actually tweeted it on 4th and 16 page. I don't know if you guys have ever seen Talladega Nights, but the scene where Ricky Bobby puts the knife in his leg and he's like, I'm paralyzed. And Michael Clark Duncan's like, no, you're not. You can walk. And then you had his friend over there saying, wake up. That's kind of like the Big Ten and the ACC and the ACC. They're kind of trying to figure out, why are you acting this way? Why are you doing this? You could be playing with us. We've got some of the same information that you've got. If you've got information that we don't, you need to let us know.
And and these 3 conferences are all like, okay, we've gone to these doctors, we've gone to these guys, and they have greenlit us to play with these protocols. But then you see the two outliers, and they're like, yeah, we're just not going to play. And the Pac-12, it's not even football for the Pac-12. The Pac-12 canceled sports.
Yeah.
They canceled sports in general until 2021.
I feel so bad for everyone that's
and
a
also,
Pac-12
like,
student athlete.
just more collateral.
Yeah.
That's going to affect March Madness. That's going to affect college soccer.
Yep.
It's going to affect the College World Series. It's going to affect everything until next year when hopefully all this mess is gone. But the Pac-12 is screwing up everything and they're already coming out and saying that now.
Yeah.
They're not delaying it and saying, oh, we'll cancel football now and we'll figure out that down the road, which is, while the Big Ten's being stupid, that's smarter on their part than the Pac-12.
Right.
They canceled everything until 2021.
To me, that's a save face thing, though, for them to go ahead and immediately put out, hey, we're going to try to at least play in the spring, because then you still have the opportunity to say, Justin Fields, please come back. We need you. You are our best chance, because we know Michigan's going to drop the ball. We already know that Michael Penix Jr. is going to get hurt. We already know that maybe Minnesota was a flash in the pan. Iowa, hey, they don't have the quarterback anymore. What are we going to do, right? Justin Fields and the Ohio State Buckeyes were the absolute best chance for the Big Ten to get back and hoist up the trophy again, the Dr. Pepper trophy.
And
that was it.
And I think their conference would have been really deep and good, as it typically is.
Super good, right?
There's like 5 or 6 teams in there that are probably going to win 9+, 8+, 9+.
Not now.
No, they're not playing.
Not now, because they're not playing. So I tweeted this out there, and I want to have some fun with you guys. But for all the people out there that are a Big Ten fan, some of those random Pac-12 fans that happen to think they would even compete if they got on the field with Clemson. Clemson doesn't play anybody. Y'all on a soft schedule. Y'all don't play anybody. We would beat y'all so bad. Well, y'all don't play anybody. You don't play anybody this year.
Quite literally nobody.
Literally nobody. And I think it's the fault of your inept commissioners. I think, Kevin is new. Kevin Warren's new to it. Larry Scott is also new over at the Pac-12. 2 guys that are just kind of, I've even heard stories about conversations between some of the players of the We United group with Larry Scott about, the whole demands and everything that he needed. And he went nuclear on them. He was not happy at all. He had to be reined in from what I've heard about it. So these guys, to me, they just kind of want to just say, hey, we're going to be the first one. We're going to be noble and say we're going to cancel. But if the SEC, if the ACC, and if the Big 12, and forsake the whole fact that the American and the Sun Belt, if they can get through a season healthy in the fall, do you know how bad that's going to look?
Oh, it's
for
going
the
to
Big
be
Ten
it's going to
and
be
the
an
Pac-12?
abysmal look for the Big Ten and the Pac-12, and I think you could even describe it as catastrophic, because if these major programs go through, they play the season with little to no complications, and then they play this national championship game if they keep the same format, it's going to look really bad on them, and you're going to look back where the presidents of these universities have to be looking down on the athletic department and saying, you just lost me by making this decision as a conference. You just lost me $300 million.
Yeah.
And especially these schools like Ohio State, like, you just lost me $200 million, and Michigan, they're in the same boat, being these prominent programs, and it's just really going to be financial hell for all these schools that don't play if everyone is able to stay healthy and complete a full season. God
And
forbid.
your recruits, like I said, we don't know what's going to happen with this. This could be a fallout because, again, they're going to be behind. You're not going to have the same preparation as a team.
Because these schools that are playing, the ACC, the SEC, and the Big 12, they're not going to have any eligibility problems. Everyone's just going to move on at a regular pace. But then you look at these guys in the Pac-12, you look at these guys in the Big 10, now you all of a sudden have this disaster with eligibility on, are these players allowed to stay another year? If so, these incoming freshmen don't have a spot. They're going to have to find somewhere else to go play. And the timeline on it is concerning, too, for letters of intent, for signing day. The whole timeline is misconstrued now.
And well, imagine this. I'll just go ahead and put it on record now. The Big Ten will absolutely have 0 teams in the playoffs of 2021 if they play in the spring. Because you're talking about having a program play competitive football, not just scrimmaging, not just yellow jerseys, no contact with the quarterback. We're talking about busting grapes out there. Playing in 2021 spring, dealing with injuries and the things that happen with it, not knowing what the situation with COVID is going to be during that time, and then expect it to compete with a team like Clemson or Georgia or Florida or Alabama, when they are literally like, yeah, we finished our season in January. We're going to be resting since then, and yeah, we're just going to have fun. You're going to have Clemson literally in a spring game just scrimmaging, having fun, and you're going to have Ohio State literally trying to play, an actual game. So I don't know how this works. Neil Grimsley in the comment section says Clemson will be poaching any 5-star and the Big Ten has coming in. That's actually something I'm going to have to disagree with you with. Dabo has a big policy on not taking any transfers in. You can transfer into Clemson to the program. We've had a couple of guys do it. But you are usually just a role player, a guy that's going to help out in the practice squad, a guy that's going to help out in leadership. You're not going to be a player for Clemson. He has done that so that the program can cultivate their own culture, have those guys that want to be there, not guys that are waffling on it. This is one of the reasons why he has that rule about if you commit to Clemson, you have to be all in. He does not want you to go take a whole lot of other visits. That's how he built his culture. So, unless something changes.
Even with Clemson recruiting, there's a rule where if you decommit, he doesn't he's like, okay, this is it.
We're going to find somebody else.
If you commit, you can't expect, if you commit and decommit, you can't expect your spot to still be here when you come back.
Yeah,
that's like a noted thing in the program.
Yeah, well, we saw that already.
With
Jordan Hancock, 4-star. Man. So Jordan Hancock, 4-star cornerback out of Georgia, was committed to Clemson, decommitted, went to Ohio State. I'm just saying, in those situations, things like that will happen. Again, we're talking about some guys that did transfer into the Big Ten that literally won't have a chance to play this season. Your best bet is to play. And then you had guys, we're already seeing this kind of shake up anyway with recruiting and how things are functioning. You don't see a whole lot of reclassification in football. You see it in basketball sometimes. You'll have a high school senior who will, instead of going to college, they'll do this, or if they're a junior or whatever, they'll go and play immediately because you can do that. You have a little bit of time with G League and all this other stuff. Football is very hectic, and jumping from high school to college is extreme jump. And jumping from college to pro is even more extreme. So that's why they have those rules 3 years removed. So at this point, you're a kid who's trying to reclassify so that you can play. Tony Grimes, 5-star cornerback out of Virginia, committed to North Carolina, and then after all this happened, he was like, you know what, man, I might as well just go ahead and play now. So he reclassified for the 2020 class, took his ratings down a little bit with 247 and Rivals and all that stuff, but he's going to be on their roster. Now, in his situation, do you lose a year of eligibility? Should he have stayed and came into the 2021 class? That way he doesn't have to worry about it. You know one reason why he won't have to worry about it, though, Fex? Because he plays in the ACC. ACC is going to play. And is it anybody's surprise that the southern schools are playing football? They're saying, load them up, put on those pads, let's go. The one team I will give all the credit to is Nebraska. Scott Frost came out and was like, look, I don't care what the Big Ten said. We will go anywhere and play. We're still only going to win 4 games, but we'll go anywhere and play anybody. So they are looking, we're already talking about this. So the SEC has already come out and said, hey, we can't accept any other teams. It's just a little tricky. It would be hard to get all that done in this short amount of time. So they're not going to accept any other teams from other conferences. There's a whole lot of chatter about Ohio State, and Michigan, and Penn State joining the SEC. Of course, that's not going to happen. I don't think it's going to happen with the ACC too, especially when we just got Notre Dame in there. We had to beg them to get in. Take half of their money to be able to get in, but that leaves the Big 12. So the Big 12 is actually kind of dumb. For all of you who don't know math, this one's pretty easy. It's called the Big 12, but you only got 10 teams. So you could bring in 2 other schools. We've had some other schools that were in the Big 12 before, like a Colorado. They're a part of the Pac-12. They're not going to get to play this year. And you have Nebraska, who's also a part of the Big Ten, could possibly come in and play. You know, that's an opportunity for them. I don't know what's going to happen. I have zero inclination that will really happen. But this begs the question in the first place, should we even have conferences? Could we just blow this whole thing up and say we're like a nation conference, kind of just like divisions but not conference, right? So you could have these teams playing each other, these teams playing each other, these teams playing each other, and then just all come together for a playoff and just play. Right?
I mean, if you're those 3 conferences, at that point you have to consider that, because I feel like a unionized version of these conferences where everyone's on the same page and you can interact and play whoever might be beneficial to all 3 of the programs profit-wise, because you can get more marquee matchups, because no one wants to watch Wake Forest Duke. Let's just get real.
That's true.
No one wants to watch Wake Forest Duke. Get a grip. And it's so
you're right.
If we can play these interconference matchups where everyone fuses into one for just like this adapted year, I feel like that could be beneficial to everyone profit-wise, entertainment-wise, and it could create a better ranking system to get the right teams into the playoffs.
Right. But on the same token, nobody wants to watch Alabama play Vanderbilt either.
Yeah.
So
it's beneficial to everyone if you can get these conferences to get the best possible matchups that are going to make you money to try and salvage some of this money you're losing regardless because of these other conferences in the NCAA and the fans, etc. So I feel like that is a good proposal that I don't know if we'll see happen, but on paper it's a good idea that it seems to benefit everyone.
I think this is going to change college football for the future. Not only you're seeing multiple things happen. You're seeing some schools and some things happen where you say, you don't have to do it the way we've always done it. We don't have to do it that way. We can think of other solutions. You're seeing players now have voices. You're having guys that are normally quiet and shy, reserved. You looked at Trevor Lawrence 2 years ago, you would think, does this kid talk? Now he's out there getting retweeted by the president. You got Darian Rencher, who's always been a voice, now being able to get out there and talk about things. You've got players from all over the country being able to use their voice in a positive way to be able to represent themselves. And then just in general, I mean, this might affect scheduling, how the playoffs are going. You know, we've needed these type of things. I just hate that it had to be this way. See a really good combination, a question here, and I've seen this a couple people say this before today too. Got Jonathan Cheek and Neil Grimsley. Jonathan Cheek says Clemson, Nebraska for the +1 game. And then Neil Grimsley comes in and says a Clemson-Nebraska matchup could go retro from the '81 national title.
Bring it on.
Bring it on. They would literally get skunked.
Oh, it would be bad.
Pass the sticks in the first quarter.
It would be bad.
But it's a game.
Yeah.
It would have been better than Akron or Citadel or.
It's better than playing It's better than playing Furman.
Right.
Like, seriously,
and
it's better than playing a cupcake.
At this point, I don't think we have to worry so much about out of conference schedule or strength of schedule, because again, if you win your conference with this setup, because there's seemingly only going to be 3 conferences major playing, and we're still waiting on word from the American, and we're still waiting on word from the Sun Belt.
Like, just to bring it up again, you know what
getting
sucks
it.
about this whole situation? We still don't know. we still at this juncture, the season's supposed to start in a month, and we still don't know what the conference or the schedule or the playoffs are going to look like. And there's been no word from anyone on what it's going to possibly look like.
Yeah, and that's the crushing part of this, is we're all having this hypothetical right now. We're ragging on the Big Ten, we're ragging on the Pac-12, but the ACC could come out and say something dumb too. We all know how John Swofford is. So it's one of those deals where we could figure out later on this week, even after this video is posted, I might look like I've got egg on my face, and it's time to just go ahead and say, hey, pack it up and just not have a football season this year. In that event, though, I think that we would have better clarity. We could get over it. For the people who just can't not live with college football, here's your chance to go ahead and get yourself prepared. If you don't like any of the teams in the SEC, ACC, or the Big 12, go ahead and pack it up. And for us here at 4th and 16, we're going to have football regardless. We're not going out with football. In fact, if we end up having the football season canceled, I will be in this studio with Faxon at this table watching a simulated game of NCAA football with Clemson, because we're all that desperate at this point. And with that said, folks, we're at the end of the show, and I appreciate you watching. We had fun tonight. It was a blast. You guys kept it up. Good energy. Good comment section, too. Of course, we'll be able to watch this again on YouTube as a replay. Twitter should still have it. Facebook will have it as well. And we're working on getting the podcast going again. We've got some technical issues with that, but we're going to have some fun. And as always, thank you for joining us. It's great to be a Clemson Tiger. Have a great night. Be safe. And hopefully we'll have football. We'll see.